I'm confused. What happened here? With the NFL one, they allegedly owed $14.8 billion out, and then all of a sudden the judge says, actually, I don't think that's the case.
The jury found that Sunday Ticket, as it's currently packaged and sold, is an antitrust violation. And the judge said there's more than enough evidence in the record to support that fine. The problem is setting damages. You got to construct this fake hypothetical world where we figure out what would have been paid for Sunday Ticket but for the antitrust violation.
The NFL Sunday Ticket trial has been one of the more compelling stories of this NFL offseason. I made another video about it a couple weeks ago, but there's been some new developments since then. But the Sunday Ticket trial has been getting surprisingly little coverage, and I actually think that's deliberate. I think it's intentional, and I'll explain that a little bit later in this video. But in case you're not completely caught up with the Sunday Ticket trial and what's been going on here, a few weeks ago, plaintiffs made the argument that from 2011 to 2022, when DirecTV had the Sunday Ticket, the NFL deliberately drove the cost of the Sunday Ticket up in order to benefit the NFL, CBS, and Fox. Because by making the Sunday Ticket too expensive for most consumers to get it, it meant that the NFL, CBS, and Fox got to control what games you watch and which games you don't watch. And with them controlling that, they were able to manipulate the market so that certain games get way more views, which brings ad revenue up for those specific games, and they would do it on a weekly basis. That's what the plaintiffs argued. Well, according to a jury in Los Angeles, this was an antitrust violation. The trial went for about 2 weeks, and the jury found that the NFL was guilty of antitrust for $4.7 billion in damages. In an antitrust violation, that number automatically triples. So that's why you kept hearing people mention $14.1 billion, because that's what it would actually amount to if the NFL were completely found guilty. A couple of weeks after the jury verdict, however, the judge presiding over the case actually overturned the jury's decision in a 16-page document. According to Mike Florio, Judge Gutierrez overruled the verdict because he didn't agree with the math and methodology that Dr. Rasher and Dr. Zona used to justify the $4.7 billion in damages. Now, Judge Gutierrez did write that the court does not find that it would be unreasonable for a juror to find that there was a conspiracy that unreasonably restrained trade. There was evidence in the record, even without the testimonies of Dr. Rasher and Dr. Zona, to support a reasonable jury finding of unreasonable restraint of trade at each step of the rule of a reason, or at the rule of reason. In other words, Judge Gutierrez agrees that it's reasonable for a jury to find the NFL guilty of antitrust violations, but he doesn't agree with the damages that Dr. Rasher and Dr. Zona provided in their testimonies. Now, in an episode of PFTPM, Mike Florio, who did practice law for nearly 20 years before committing full-time to Pro Football Talk, he explained that the way that an expert testimony has to explain damages in these types of cases would be for us to imagine a world where the NFL doesn't commit the antitrust violations. We have to imagine, like, okay, so in a world where the NFL doesn't commit the antitrust violations, how much would the victims of antitrust have saved? In that world where the NFL does the right thing and doesn't break the law, how much money would it have cost them then? Well, the rationale that Dr. Rasher and Dr. Zona used in their testimony, if the NFL didn't commit antitrust violations, they might have just not even had the Sunday Ticket at all, and instead they would have gone to more of a college football format where if you watch college football on Saturdays, those games are spread between like 20 different networks. It's not just CBS and Fox. Those games are on like Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2. They've got them on like ABC has games, ESPN and ESPN2 have games. Like all the networks pretty much get involved. So instead of having like a college football blackout restriction package, because there are no blackout restrictions, you can get pretty much every college football game just by having like the second tier level of cable. So if the NFL was under that format, then the victims of antitrust wouldn't have spent anything from 2011 to 2022 because it would have just cost whatever their cable package cost. So in that universe, it would have been 2.4 million residential, and then all of the small business owners, they would have saved $4.7 billion. That's the logic that Dr. Rasher and Dr. Zona used that Judge Gutierrez didn't agree with. But as Florio points out, for expert witnesses, their areas of expertise have to be approved by the judge before trial. So the things that they're going to be allowed to discuss in their testimony, the things that they're going to be allowed to bring up, the things they're going to be allowed to say, the judge has to approve of all of that. So before the trial even begins, Judge Gutierrez knows exactly what the experts are planning to testify. So it's kind of fucked up that, and this is Mike Adams talking, not Mike Florio necessarily, but it's fucked up that the judge allows them to testify. He waits for the testimony to happen, waits for the ruling to happen where the jury agrees with the testimony, and then goes, yeah, I know I allowed for Dr. R and Dr. Z to testify. I know that I told you to accept them as experts, but I changed my mind. Their expertise doesn't make sense to me anymore, so the NFL's off the hook. Like, if you as the judge didn't agree with their areas of expertise and didn't agree with the logic they were going to use and agree with all of that stuff, why did you allow them as experts in your trial? And one more thing on the Sunday Ticket trial, and I promise we're almost done here. Thanks for watching this far. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and then turn on those notifications if you want more updates on the Sunday Ticket trial as more stuff comes out and happens. There's a very specific reason that I believe why CBS and Fox and ESPN didn't do a lot of reporting on the Sunday Ticket trial. Pretty much the only place you could hear about it was Mike Florio and, well, me, Mike Adams. But I think there's a very specific reason. Look, Fox Sports can't really report on the Sunday Ticket trial because Fox Sports is implicated as being one of the guilty parties who helped, screw over consumers. They helped the NFL in raising the cost of Sunday Ticket. They were in on it, right? CBS, they're implicated as being in on it. So obviously Fox Sports, CBS Sports, they're not really going to report on this thing. NFL Network, well, it's obvious why they're not going to report on it. You used to be able to go to ESPN for stuff like this, though, because ESPN used to kind of be the neutral, hey, look, we do have relationships with all the leagues, but we just report on sports. So it used to be that ESPN was really good independent journalists. Right now, that's all in the process of changing when it comes to the NFL. Because right now, the NFL and ESPN are actually working on a deal where the NFL is going to try and buy an equity stake in ESPN. ESPN, in turn, would take over control of NFL media, aka NFL Network. So ESPN doesn't really want to report on anything or do anything that's going to upset the NFL while they're in the middle of negotiations right now. And sure, the other day I did catch on ESPN them reporting that the ruling got overturned, despite the fact that they pretty much didn't report on the trial happening when it was happening. They did report on getting overturned, but that's because it getting overturned is good for the NFL. So anything that's good for the NFL, sure, they'll report that. When the NFL was found guilty, I didn't hear a word from ESPN. I did hear from the Pat McAfee show. They talked about it a little bit, but the Pat McAfee show is different. For starters, their show literally includes a disclaimer before every episode and 1 hour into every episode, and on the ticker at the bottom of the screen during every episode, the disclaimer literally says, our opinions don't reflect ESPN. But like they're on ESPN and literally say, yeah, but we don't count towards ESPN. The guys at ESPN don't agree with the things that we say. So there's that disclaimer. So they're kind of different for that reason. And they're also different because Pat McAfee still owns the rights to his show. He still owns the Pat McAfee show, which is why it's simulcast on YouTube. ESPN just leases it. So ESPN gets to show the Pat McAfee show for 2 hours, and actually they get the third hour on ESPN Plus. So with all of those people being out on reporting on the Sunday Ticket trial, and we could go down the list of everyone else and why they won't do it. Rich Eisen, we don't hear much about the Sunday Ticket trial. Well, yeah, he does a ton of work for NFL Network. He can't really talk that much about bad things when it comes to the NFL. The only person who can keep reporting on it is, once again, Mike Adams Football. But also Mike Florio. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. Mike Florio can report on this because, one, he still owns half of Pro Football Talk. So NBC doesn't really get to give him 100% like, hey, you will not talk about this, you will do that, you will do that. Like, he still gets a say in what he reports on, what he talks about, that type of thing. And that brings me to point number 2, which is that I don't think NBC cares about the Sunday Ticket trial because the Sunday Ticket has nothing to do with NBC. The Sunday Ticket only applies to the games that are played, 1 o'clock Eastern time, 4:05 Eastern time, and 4:25 Eastern time. And there's only 2 networks that get games during those time periods, CBS and Fox. That's it. Nobody else, ESPN doesn't have games during that time period. NBC doesn't have games during that time period. ABC, which is also ESPN, doesn't have games during that time period. Peacock, Amazon Prime, none of them have games during that time period. It's only CBS and Fox. So if I'm NBC, what do I care if Florio wants to talk about the Sunday Ticket trial? We have nothing to do with it. Bottom line, this trial is far from over. Surely the plaintiffs are going to appeal this ruling by Judge Gutierrez. I don't really see how an appeals court isn't going to side with the plaintiffs. I mean, the jury literally found the NFL guilty, and even the judge overruling it said, yeah, I agree. I get why the jury found them guilty. I think that this is inevitably going to get overturned again on appeals, and it's going to find its way to the Supreme Court. There's almost no way this doesn't make it to the Supreme Court, in my eyes at least, but I will let you guys know, and I will keep you updated. There's one more thing I want to talk about because I don't want to make a whole other video on this topic. I'd rather just staple it to the back of this one. So the NFL dropped an ad today where they revealed that flag football for men and women is going to be a part of the 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. And I just got a few things on this topic real quick. Number 1, the ad was super cool. Jalen Hurts shows up, lights a football on fire, chucks it into the gauntlet of the Coliseum or the whatever that thing is called. I don't know if is that called a gauntlet? It's called a goblet. Like the Goblet of Fire from Harry Potter was like a goblet that looked like that. I don't know what the hell that thing's called. Whatever it is, lights that thing on fire with a lit football. It was pretty cool. All right, so that's the positive. The negative is this. Nobody wants to watch flag football. It is so fucking boring to watch. Like, watching the highlights from the Pro Bowl was super boring. I'm talking about the highlights from the Pro Bowl flag football game. Flag football, a ton of fun to play. If you live in the Seattle area and you need one more for flag football, hit me up because I will show up and I will play. You want me to come and watch you play flag football? Fuck off. I have no interest in watching. But then there's also one more piece of this, which is that, like, okay, so the Olympics are in late July. Who are we going to send to represent Team USA? It's going to have to be like college kids that aren't starters on a major program. Or I don't know, do we have colleges that play flag football? Is that a thing we do? I've never seen it on TV or anything. We can't send NFL players because late July, I mean, they're all in camp getting ready for the season. The timing doesn't work out. Right now, we've got Team USA playing basketball. We sent our NBA players to go play basketball because, basketball season ended months ago. Bottom line, flag football sucks. Nobody wants to watch that shit.